Hello! I'm joining you today from our virtual classroom because today's lesson is going to be focusing a lot about the importance of education because Confucius, our topic for today, he liked education a lot. So in order to get started, we are going to be opening up our China Notes document. We'll be using this presentation to help us fill in those notes about Confucianism. Again, please feel free to pause the video at any time, especially if it has some slides of notes on it. You can pause and get down those notes and then hit start when you need to. So in the China Notes document, we're going to be scrolling down to the section labeled Philosophies. The philosophies of China came about during the time of the Warring States. Now, the time of the Warring States was how the Zhou dynasty ended. And when that Zhou dynasty ended, there was turmoil. There was no set king. There was no peace at all. All of the neighboring villages and all the neighboring dynasties, they were all at war with each other. And when they were at war with each other, it's not a peaceful time for anybody involved. So it's during this time that many people came about with ideas of how to restore order to society and bring back the peace to the area. And people disagreed about how to do this, and they came up with philosophies. Now, philosophies are not a religion that you worship. They are just simply your ideas about the world, and specifically your ideas about education, government, and family, and how to restore that peaceful idea. So 3 different groups of people are going to have 3 different ideas of how to get back to a peaceful time. So over the course of the next 3 days, we will be learning about Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism. But today will be Confucianism. In accordance with the ideas of Confucianism, I would like you to take some time right now to do the reading that's posted in the notes document. There's also a video there as well, which might be worth it for you to watch, especially if you're more of an auditory or visual learner. Because Confucius loves education, you want to make sure that you make me proud with what you're doing. So pause the video right here, answer the questions that are posted in the notes document on your own. And once you have done it on your own, you're going to hit play on the video and I will continue to go over these answers. I'm watching you, no cheating here. Okay, so the first question says, who is Confucius? Confucius, he was born to a very poor family. His mother married a man who was much older than him, which actually happened a lot back then because you married not for love, but for wealth, and people who were older would therefore have more money. So when his father died, his mother was then left to support the family on her own, and she had a really hard time doing that. Because he was from a poor family, his perspective on life is going to be very different from somebody who is a noble. He actually had to teach himself to read. He was not able to go to school. One of the missions of his philosophy is that everybody should be entitled to a free education. At this time, it was really only for the wealthiest of the people. Now, as much as you may say that school is the worst and it's horrible, I hope this whole experience has really taught you that it was actually fun to go to school and to be able to hear people explain something to you and not have to do it on your own, which is what Confucius had to do. He developed a philosophy that is all going to be based around the word of respect. And once he died, very similar to Buddha, his students then put his teachings down into a book called the Analects. Question number 2, what was China like during his lifetime? Now, keep in mind, all 3 of these philosophies come about during the time of the Warring States, which is a time of turmoil. The government that was in power when Confucius was alive was a very corrupt government. And this corrupt government had only the wealthiest people in power. In order to stay in power, you had to be from that wealthy family, and they would only then reward the family members or their friends. It had nothing to do with whether or not you were qualified. So here he is, a poor man who has educated himself, who is totally qualified to be ruling in the government, but he can't. Now, according to Confucius, he has something that he calls the 5 basic relationships. He says that if everybody follows these 5 relationships, there will be no problems or disagreements in the world, and everyone will be at peace with each other. So the first one is the ruler to subject. So think about your king. The king has a certain responsibility. He has to keep his people safe. He has to provide for them things like roads and an army and a justice system. If the king does those things, then his subjects, the people that he rules over, they must obey him. If the king is corrupt and he does not provide for the people, the subjects have every right to rebel. So this 5-way relationships, each of them, it's kind of like a 2-way street. Each person has their part of the agreement that they have to uphold. The next one says the husband to the wife. The husband, his duty is to provide for the family. He must provide a shelter, food, clothing for the family. Those are his responsibilities. He must go out and get a job so he can provide those things. Because the husband provides those things, the wife therefore must obey him and do whatever it is that the husband asked the wife to do. If the husband does not provide for the wife, then the wife does not need to obey. As much as we may say that this is not right and that the wife shouldn't have to do all those things, that is the way that things were in that time period. Next is the father to the son. Because the father is providing food and shelter for the son must obey the father. The next one probably applies to you guys the most, and that is the older sibling to the younger sibling. The older sibling, as much as you may think that it is so annoying to be the older sibling because your younger sibling just follows you around all the time into every room of the house that you go into and wants to do whatever you are doing, they are following you because they look up to you and you are the coolest person in the world to them. You are their role model. Meanwhile, you need to keep that in mind. You need to think about the decisions that you're making because they're looking up to you and they want to be like you. Make sure that you are going in a good step. Let's say that you're trying drugs. Well, would you really want your younger sibling to be trying drugs as well? Let's say you are failing a class. Would you want your younger sibling to also be failing that class? They look up to you and they will follow you. Younger siblings, because you are looking up to those older siblings, you also must respect them. So I like this meme over here. I think it describes it perfectly. The older sibling is just so embarrassed that she's wearing the same dress as her younger sister, but the younger sister is thrilled because she's dressed just like the coolest person in the world, which is her older sibling. So think of Confucius next time you want to get into an argument with your siblings as you're locked in the houses. And lastly, friends of friend. Confucius has a saying. He says, have no friends not equal to yourself. So that is pretty close here. He's saying that you shouldn't have friends who are going to be making fun of you or being a bad influence or putting you in dangerous situations. You should have friends who are equal to yourself, friends who are going to make you a better person and agree with what your viewpoints are. Okay, so that brings us to question number 4. How should people act in these 5 basic relationships? Confucius is all about respect. It is his best word. He's a little R-E-S-P-E-C-T, find out what it means to me. And he says you need to respect your elders. If somebody is older than you, they have more experience, they know more about the world. Yes, your parents do know more than you. Yes, I do know more than you. So you need to respect those people because they know more than you about certain situations. He also says that leaders must set a good example by being kind, honest, wise, and faithful. And if those leaders are good examples and good role models, then the other people will look to them and follow. What influence did Confucius have on the Chinese government? Well, the Han Dynasty, which is going to be a little bit later, we've learned about the Shang and the Zhou, and later will be the Han Dynasty. They actually will hire civil servants based on their ability, instead of just giving the jobs to the nobles, the wealthiest, the people who maybe had some friends or connections. In fact, they come up with something called the imperial examination. It was used in China for a long period of time. And this imperial examination was a test to show that you are qualified. Um, it's actually still used today. If you want to be a police officer, you must take a civil service exam to show that you know information. If you want to be a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, there are tests that you need to take in order to show that you are qualified for that today. So you had a little picture there, and I asked you to add a caption. It was a Google drawing, so you can double click on the picture in order to easily add in the caption. And in this picture, it looks like the man who's wearing a graduation cap with tassels on it. That is actually the cap of a Chinese king. And the other man is bowing down to him. So this would be showing your ruler to subject relationship of those 5 relationships. And the caption might say, "It is my pleasure to serve you, my king." I put a little question there in your notes document. Confucius had many great ideas about government, so you would think that the ancient Chinese government would have embraced them, that Confucius would have been a king at some point in time. Instead, he never really held political office. He did for a little bit of time, and he was quickly overturned. The people in the government, they felt threatened by him. So why? Why didn't they embrace him? And I put this little picture here to explain it to you. Because in the classroom, it would be the same thing as the kid who raises his hand and says, "Miss Kane, you forgot to write the homework. Miss Kane, you're not giving us enough homework. Miss Kane, the test was too easy." Nobody wants that kid. Nobody wants that kid to be saying those things and giving everybody else more work. So likewise, Confucius, he's standing there and he's saying, "Hey, as government officials, we need to be doing more." And everybody else is going to say, "Shh, quiet that man. Get him out of the government office. We don't want anybody to make us have to do more and take away our wealth." So he will not really hold political office because he's threatening the people who are there. If you've ever heard the saying, "A wise man once said," that saying, the wise man, it's Confucius. So he has a lot of wise sayings. The first one is, "Do unto others as you would have done unto yourself," which is a very, very famous saying. Probably, you know it as the golden rule. He also says, "The man who asks a question is a fool for a moment. The man who does not ask is a fool for life." So it's better to ask a question when you're confused than just to assume that you know everything and end up looking like a fool later on. The wise man also says, "It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop." Kind of like the story of the tortoise and the hare. It's better to keep going than to give up. He also has another one. He says, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." So even if you think it's hard, start somewhere and keep going. This one I think really applies to our lives today. Life is really simple, but we insist on making it more complicated. We had so many complications in our lives before this. We had dance recitals and soccer tournaments and all of your tests that you had to study for, and it was stressing you out so much. And now your life has been made so simple, and you realize that some of these things, what is essential for your survival, isn't all the other things we had in our lives. All right, so I hope you learned a little bit about Confucianism. I want you to go over to Socrative, room code Kane MMS, and take the quiz to show what you have learned today. Tomorrow, I'll see you again, and we will be learning about Taoism. Okay, bye.